مرحبا بكم. My name is Mulka.
Recording is on.
Okay. So, hello everyone. مرحبا بكم. My name is Mulka. I am an economist by training, currently based in Dubai, and I'm a proud Shaper member. I'm very thrilled to be moderating this talk today. Before we start, let me briefly introduce the Global Shapers community as well as shed some light on the purpose of this event. So first, the Global Shapers community is a network of young people driving dialogue, action, and change. The community is present in more than 400 hubs and 140 countries globally. We are proud to say that our Tunis hub is one of the first worldwide and is currently composed of 15 active members who have complementary backgrounds and interests and actively try to bring positive change in Tunisia and the broader MENA region on many fronts, either fintech, economic development, heritage protection, gender equality, you name it, many really cool topics. Today's event falls under an initiative we started this year titled After Corona Talks, to discuss the impact of COVID on different aspects of our lives, as well as the way forward. So today is our third talk. We previously had the pleasure and the privilege to host Dr. Aida Rubena, who talked about NGO contribution in rebuilding Tunisia post-COVID, as well as Professor Adel Ben Youssef, who talked about the future of work and skills, given the acceleration of future of work due to COVID. So without further ado, let me quickly introduce our special guest today. I'll also give her the chance to further elaborate on her successful career and achievement. مرحبا بك Olfa.
مرحبا.
So Olfa is Tunisian, but is currently based in Silicon Valley. She's a global expert in strategic construction-driven planning and execution of major capital projects. She's an American-trained engineer, inventor, and Silicon Valley entrepreneur who founded Advanced Work Packaging Institute before co-founding Concord Project Technologies in 2016. So before we move to the core part of our talk, let me just mention that this session will be recorded in order for the content to be disseminated to the broader audience, and the session would last just 1 hour. The talk will be structured into 3 main sections. So the first would be devoted to get to know our guest. The second would be to deep dive into the core subject, which is the impact of COVID on the global economy from Olfa's standpoint. And then lastly, the impact of COVID on our Tunisian economy. Then I'll open up the floor to our shapers to directly ask their questions to Olfa as well. So our shaper Haifa Zdiri volunteered to be the note taker during the talk. So thank you, Haifa, for that. I really appreciate it. So let's deep dive into our talk. So my first question for you, Olfa, is how would you define yourself? We've seen you, like, personally, I've seen you in many talks. At some point, your name was mentioned for you to become a minister, part of the government, the Tunisian government. So, Inti, if you wanted to describe yourself in 3 words or 3 adjectives, what would be the 3 adjectives you would choose?
Wow, that's a tough question.
I know it's difficult.
Coming up with the short answers is one of the most difficult things, right? And talking for a long time is easier.
Yeah, I know.
I would say Tunisian, global, second word, and engineer. Maybe these are the 3 keywords I would use.
So I couldn't hear the third one. So Tunisian, global, and?
Tunisian, global, and engineer.
Engineer, perfect.
That's my training, before doing management law and anything else. It's really the engineering foundation. So.
Very cool. Thanks for that. Thank you for playing the game. I know that it's a hard question. So let's move to the next one. So we are curious to know how did you cope with COVID-19 on a personal, but most importantly on a professional level? For instance, managing teams, working remotely, dealing with uncertainties, and we know there were many. So how did you work? Like, how did you cope with everything and manage everything on a personal and professional level?
Yeah. Well, the very first thing I would like to say is that let's just accept that the world right now is different from prior to COVID. And, that the change that has happened, both in the professional, the work environment, in the various industries, obviously every industry is somehow different, that is a permanent change. So there is no such thing as going back as before. We're in a new state of being, which requires a new or updated strategies, updated methods, and so on. So for me specifically, obviously, I'm leading, a company that I co-founded, and it's a company that, it basically got past the startup stage and is in the growth stage. So when COVID hit, I had, obviously a growth strategy, which we worked on with an advisory board and, with the consultation of all people, or clients, employees. But then when COVID hit, that very same strategy was challenged, because our business model is based primarily on, sending people to be physically present in refineries, petrochemical sites, construction sites, and so on. And with a lot of the business for the company oriented toward the energy sector, so petrochemical and energy, and those two sectors, they, as you know, have been quite affected by COVID. And so it was a really an intense period where my company's literally survival was at question. And because it was contingent to these projects, being shelved, postponed, and then, what's going on in there. But then at the same time, the whole overall business model. So is that the question is, can we go back to business the way it is? Can I send consultants to sites? Can I do that kind of work? So I would say when COVID happened, the very first, let's say 6 weeks or so, March, April, kind of like, shifted to doing things digitally and virtually. And while I was doing that, my main, as an executive, my main key thought is, is this working well or not? And how about this lasting for a year or more? Can the company sustain like that? And the truth is it can't, because, a lot of the work we do is based on being in person, physically present on sites. And so we can't. So at that point, actually, I kind of like that growth strategy of the company. I had to be revisited. You can't do the same thing and expect, and you see, results are not really they're challenging, and you want to expect something different. Yeah. I had to revisit the entire strategy, and for me, I made the assumption in April that COVID is going to continue, whether at the end of the day, to be realistic, right? If you want something that is impacting the world that fast, like a pandemic, any corrective action is going to take a lot longer to sit in place, right? Mm-hmm. So I assumed, I just told everybody inside the company, well, we're not going back to doing business as usual. It doesn't matter what travel restrictions are, what the government says, what the insurance company says, all the health considerations. You know what? We need to change. And with that, actually, I kind of like what I did as it's an interesting thing, which is, in time of crisis, people tend to hold on to their money and not invest. I actually did the opposite. So I invested in a new, let's say, segment within the business, with the idea that it's 20% of that business, which is online-based, scalable, it's all virtual, technology-oriented, that would pay for, like 20% of the business would pay for the rest of the 80% while things come back again, and our traditional services would come back again. So that's what I kind of like, it was a decision to be made. It was a challenging time. I have to admit that. But now, after about last month or so, I started seeing obviously the results, and things are going back to, they're not going back, actually, they're just stabilizing. And, and that's kind of like one of the ways I coped with it from a business standpoint. So.
Yeah, but you're still working from home, or you're back to carry on?
Oh, on a personal basis, yes, I do most of the work from home, and everybody inside the company does. And I had to do some travels inside the US, though. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, like some things you gotta have to do them, okay. But no international travels, actually, which is a major change. Actually, on a personal level, I have to admit, I was doing a lot of traveling. Yeah. Last year alone was crazy. Like between the US, I went 5 times to Tunisia, about 8 or 9 times to France. I traveled also. I was literally not at home, almost never.
I know.
And by the end of the year, when COVID happened, and I started working from home, I mean, I realized on a personal level, I realized, like, first of all, that I was tired, and I didn't know that I was tired. I realized that while you're doing all of that traveling and literally like going from one place to the other, you can't really.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting.
With time difference, with even the fact of traveling, like taking the plane and being like spending so many hours in the sky.
Yes.
It's super exhausting.
So productivity wise, I would say, I thought I was productive by doing all that traveling, but the truth is, I think I have a better, let's say, a more advanced way of looking at productivity than I used to. So
very cool. Thanks a lot for sharing. Very, very, very appreciated. So this actually takes me to my to another question. Looking at gender, actually applying the gender lens, trying to understand how gender impacted both male and female. So how do you think actually COVID impacted both men and women? Do you think they got impacted equally? My assumption is no. So I feel that women are more hurt by, like, because they need to cope more with like family obligations and work, etc. Especially working from home. So I wanted to ask you, I assume you have female employees. So how did you help them manage the work-life balance?
Well, I don't know if I'm well placed to talk about gender issues, although like I have my own perspective from my own experience, but I'm not an expert in the matter. So please, anything I mention, just a disclaimer, it's not an expert opinion, just a
yeah. It's your own opinion. We fully understand that.
So well, I mean, I'll have to admit that prior to COVID, I did not really pay attention to the gender disparity between people working within the company and people I interact with. So I had the sense of, I was not even like, the way I got through in my career is just I'm never conscious about the gender differences, which is actually, it's not right? I mean, you gotta be conscious about these things, because the truth is, women, tend to be in environments where they do a lot of unpaid work. They take care of things. They sacrifice certain areas of their lives for the sake of a larger, greater good. And there are the same as well. But I would say that after, COVID, and then with that discussion and all of that, the one thing that I really noticed, for both men and women, but for women, more importantly, is that I noticed a challenge with mental health issues. And what that is that it could come from many ways, many areas. I mean, for me personally, the fact that, for example, I don't have kids. I don't have somehow it comes with the luxury of just not, having your time for your own, and you can do whatever you want with your time, obviously, comparing to women who have the responsibility of kids and education and kids, studying from home and all of those kind of things. So I would say that the one thing I noticed is this struggle for both men and women, and also, especially for women, but for both of them, as working from home and doing everything from home and all the challenges from home, is the struggle with mental health issues. And I could sense that, I could feel that in the conference calls, which I didn't pay attention to when we had personal meetings, because I'm in a meeting, it's all about work, and then I leave. And I would say that the challenge there actually is that when we're, the truth is, work and going to work, it's a way to compartmentalize our lives. And it's an escape for a lot of people. And when work merges with home, then you gotta face all the issues in one place. And it's a complex environment. So you gotta, so it comes with a lot of stress. So I would just would like to say that when it comes to gender, I would say the mental health part is definitely one that's overlooked, but it is a challenge. So.
But did you develop some initiative to help women or men overcome this mental health issue, or you're still in the process of finding out like what is the core problem?
Yeah, so for my company, because it's, you know, from a size standpoint, the company is small, so you know, it's not a matter of having like a major policy or so, but I treat it on a case-by-case basis. Okay. So I noticed that I am way more tolerant to certain things around deadlines and things like that, which I used to not be, you know. So that's kind of like, you know, on a personal basis, but actually triggered us to, within the advisory board of my company, we discussed this at the industry level, so at the construction industry level. And we started publishing, and we had this special study basically that was completed about data that we gathered around you know, women and also minorities and people, you know, kind of like ethnic differences and racial differences, especially with what happened in the US, right? With the protests around George Floyd's death. So the whole issue actually became as important as what happened with COVID, and as important as what happened last year, for example, with the Me Too movement. And so what I did is, you know, within the board, we started publishing a section, we called it opinions. And within that opinion, we publish, you know, kind of like a call for action to leaderships in the construction and capital projects industry, because we have their ear already, you know, when it comes to strategy, project management, you know. So we use that platform to convey the message around women, minorities, communities, and things like that. But I'm sure, you know, I'll have to tell you, we could do more, and I wish I could do more. So.
That's a really good first step, I think. First, being recognizing that there is a problem and solving it case by case, but also creating this platform for people to voice over these type of challenges and in the workplace. I think it's a really good first step. Thanks a lot for sharing.
I have to mention that, you know, in my industry, I was not conscious about this before because I'm more like, you know, when you're an entrepreneur and you're, you know, trying to make your way into something, you're into like hustler mode, right? So if a door closes, you gotta try to open another door. So you're not into like a mentality of questioning why I was not given that opportunity and so on. But then recently, you know, looking back at actually other younger women in the industry, other younger entrepreneurs, and my industry is not open for entrepreneurship really. It's really an old industry. So there are very few entrepreneurs that really made it. And then looking at actually, you know, ethnicities, I realized that the construction industry has a long way to go. I mean, the industry is not women friendly, and it's not inclusive. So, I mean, I have to say it, my industry is not. So we gotta, you know, we gotta be conscious about it. So
No, this is why I was a bit surprised when you said I've never really felt that. I've never felt that there is discrimination, but maybe because you were too focused on to be successful and trying to open doors when other doors closed, then you were not like fully conscious. But I feel that engineering, but more specifically construction and petrochem, is one of the least gender like equal environment you can find up there. So
yeah, no, I have a number of anecdotes. Well, I was thinking about it like for decades now. I've been in the industry for over a decade, and I'm like, okay, on all the board meetings I've been to, I rarely remember meeting a woman. So that's how literally how bad that is. But you're right. You know, when you're an entrepreneur and when you're an immigrant also. So as an immigrant to the United States, you know, I kind of like, I don't have the luxury to sit back and say, okay, you know, I'm discriminated against and do that. I literally was not into that state of mind. And then after you see others and then you get to a point where you're questioning what's going on, then you recognize that and you say, okay, I was lucky to meet certain people that opened doors for me. If a door closed, other people believed in me. There are others in the industry that are men that have like African backgrounds, or even actually white males that do, with a certain extent, with their background, they have that belief, right, in women and empowering women, given the benefits of inclusiveness. So I was lucky actually to do this, and I realized even the way I started my company in the Bay Area. My company, most of the work I did was on the Gulf Coast and in the oil and gas industry. So why am I in the Bay Area? And I thought it's because of technology, but I realized actually I moved to the Bay Area because I got fed up with the environment in the Gulf Coast and in Texas, and I said, let me start there and see if I can, penetrate the industry from the outside. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. I know that this is not the core subject of today, but it's a very, very, I'm very passionate about this topic. This is why maybe we took more time. Thank you very much for sharing. But let's switch gears and come back actually to our main focus, which is like the corona impact on your industry. But so let's move to the second part, which is the impact of COVID, according to you, on the global economy. So my question is, so we've seen that COVID had many implications on the global economy. It impacted the stock market, of course, the unemployment rate. A lot of people found themselves without jobs. There's a lot of recession risks. The tourism and travel industries were hit. Oil prices, we talked about, like the energy sector. Pharma is actually booming now with all the vaccines and all the race to find the right vaccines for this virus. So our question for you is, how will COVID shape the economy of the future, according to you? So how do you see the short and medium term impact on the industries you're most familiar with? Construction would be one, the energy sector as well. So how do you see it shaping the future?
So yeah, I mean, thank you for the question. So obviously the question is complex. Providing a short answer to that is really, I gotta be mindful about the aspects I choose in presenting this. But I would say that the key thought is that every country or every community and every industry will have its own way of being impacted and responding. For example, when we talk about construction is there are multiple subsectors in construction. You have, for example, infrastructure, residential, commercial. Then you have industrial construction, and within industrial, if we're talking about energy, for example, let's say power plants and transmission and all of that, this industry has not been very impacted. But if you talk about industrial, when it comes to refining, petrochemical, certain elements around that got really impacted. So, so it depends really on which, let's say if you're talking about, other type of high-rise building construction has definitely been impacted. But it's really, there is no industry that's, we say, okay, this industry is dead or this industry is changing in this way or the other. My view, the way I look at things, is that for any case, any country, here's the thing. When we talk about an economy, we have the business case of the economy. So, why that economic activity is happening. And then you have the project environment of the economy. So the actual operations. What has been impacted is the operations. And that's because the business case is no longer there. So if we pick the travel industry, well, people are no longer traveling. So the business case of people paying for traveling is no longer there. So then operations got disrupted. If we talk about any other industry, it's always around that. And so with COVID happening, what I would say for any leader leading any type of economic activity, whether you're leading a country, a company, a small business, a restaurant, whatever your economic activity is, whether big or small, the key question to answer is, how did your business case change with COVID? And two things. Do you still have a business case with whatever you have in place, or that business case is gone? And once you realize that, once you answer that question, that's when you make decisions around operations. Do you salvage certain assets? Do you, hire or fire people? Do you move from one place to the other, and so on? And at the larger scale, if we compare, for example, how the economy has responded in the US versus, let's say, in Tunisia, for example, or in Europe as well. I mean, what I would say at the macro level, economies that do come back in a way are basically the economies that do have the flexibility to shift basically the growth, the value creation, to shift employment from one environment to the other. So with the business case changing, you can see, for example, in the US, let's say the food, the food, restaurants and all of those got hit, yes. But then, you have on the other side, you have the whole delivery, services, the warehousing. There are more warehouses being built right now because people order more, so we need to deliver more. There is an entire back office, basically back logistics around delivering to people. Some of those sorts. So there is a shift. So it's like the value is not in this sector, but it shifted to another. And the question is really for those economies. That's why certain economies will make it. I believe the US economy will make it. Compared to other economies, is their ability at a macro level and the framework, the regulatory environment, the way, the business environment, the financial environment that enables the economy overall to shift the economic activity from one environment to the other. The issue in Tunisia is that the way our economy is structured and the way our government and our system is built around preserving value, not around enabling the free flow of exchange of value. So if somebody's employing 1,000 people, the system is built so that employer remains employing 1,000 people. Doesn't matter whether the business case is there or not.
Olfa, we'll come back to Tunisia. We have a whole section on Tunisia. We'll talk more about where we are and how do we make it, how do we improve the situation. But let me just stay focused on the US market and the global market. And I really liked what you said. Like the success depends on the ability or the flexibility to shift. This is a very powerful statement. So speaking of that, so how did for you, according to you, how did you see COVID change the way CEOs deal with their companies and make decisions? Can you give us like concrete examples on how you saw CEOs like making powerful and difficult decisions to actually preserve employment, but also preserve their current activities?
Yeah, so not all CEOs are the same, right? That's why, there are different philosophies and different leadership styles and different strategies. Yeah. But one thing for sure, when we talk about executive leadership in the industry, the number one thing that COVID has questioned is this idea that when you're an executive, your number one your number one priority is your shareholders. So is provide a return to shareholders. And we talk about financial shareholders. So generally speaking, a successful CEO is somebody who makes that return to the shareholder and maximize that return and whatever the decision is. So what we actually, what COVID, hold on, let me just do that. Yeah, so what COVID, what we have seen, with certain companies is that we're saying, okay, there is a limitation to that. Your shareholders are a component of a larger community in which the company is there. And that's your employees, the clients you interact with, the environment you're in, the society you operate in. So if you put a Fortune 500 company with, let's say, 7,000 stores around the US or everywhere, or with like a construction company with 40,000 employees and their families and all of that, it's an entire society. So their well-being should perhaps be factored into the overall, the criteria for what makes a good executive decision. And so what we've seen globally in the industry is that you have certain companies that, put more emphasis into this, employee the importance of their well-being, their safety, their security, their health, in relationship to the other considerations, the business, obviously the shareholder return, which is still important, of course. That's why companies exist, they exist to make money. So that's kind of like the purpose. But then other companies completely, one of the major decisions was that, okay, the business case is not there. I think we need to sell the company or sell parts of it or, fire people. And I've seen leaders that struggled a lot with the letting people go. And it's one of the hardest thing any manager, CEO would need to make, those decisions of letting people go. And that happened across the industry everywhere. And it's hard on everybody, on the families, on the employees, on the leadership, on everybody. So short answer to your question is, I would say the traditional model that is taught in business schools about what is a good CEO, and that is rewarded by the way we evaluate the financial performance of companies, that's shareholder return primarily. I think that reached the limit, and a larger framework is more and more into consideration.
Yeah, thanks a lot. But so this is like generally, like as you said, like a CEO is its whole focus is of course the return to shareholders, but also now there is more shift towards the well-being, safety of the employees, and also maintaining during their jobs. But would you be able to give us a concrete example where you found that the CEO decision was super powerful, either for a Fortune 100 company or even for a smaller company? Can you provide a concrete example where you really found that the CEO really made strong decisions in terms of contingencies that really thought you thought were ready for?
So your voice got a little bit cut, but if I got your question, it's about an example of one of the CEOs I interacted with and I've seen. Yeah. So I would pick the example of this company. So it's a company in the petrochemical industry with multiple sites. It's a company that with petrochemical, so refining sites.
Yeah.
And the company was going through a growth stage. So they hired a lot over the past 2 years because they're planning to expand.
Mm-hmm.
They got a lot of investment. And with COVID, they had to let go. They had to put a hold on, hundreds of millions of dollars of investment. And so they have to let people go. So the decision had to be made. But with this company, one of the leaders in the company that I know personally, actually, and he's even a mentor of mine, actually. So what he did he focused, for example, on the single women that were working within the company and that were let go off. So he actually created this program where for all of these women, single women working within the company with, single mothers,
Yeah.
So they have kids. And so they're only relying on themselves for that. He created the program for a transition period. So funding them for a transition period after they leave the company. And calling in every single network, every single favor, every single person they know in the industry to help them transition to other jobs in adjacent sectors. So I felt that, number one, the focus on the most vulnerable among people who were let go, and those are the single mothers, and helping them outside the company, literally legal responsibility, which is giving them their dues by the time they leave. I think that was one of the most the programs that really stuck with me.
You're absolutely right. That's really, really nice. Like very, very nice of him to actually think outside his firm, because somebody else would have laid off the needed people and moved on with his life. So, but he decided not to, and he decided to find other opportunities for these women, for them to sustain their lives and the lives of their children. So.
And when you're in a leadership role to do that means a budget. That means you use actually political capital from your role in your company for such a thing, right? So it's something that's why leadership matters. Leadership matters. I mean, I believe in that. So.
Thanks, Olfa, for sharing. So I think let's move to our Tunisia, to the third and last part of the talk before the Q&A. So my first question for you in this third part, it would be like, what according to you would be the key economic sectors that Tunisian government should focus on in the next period, given what we are currently facing?
Okay. Well, I would say number one is agriculture. And I'll tell you why, because, if you look at the basic needs of human beings, it's basically, first of all, it's literally nutrition, food, and security. If you're not well fed and you're not secure and safe, you can't do anything. You can't think, you can't produce, you can't work, you can't do anything. So for Tunisia specifically, with its potential, I think with post-COVID, agriculture should be our number one priority. Now, this being said, what I would like to actually highlight is that when I say agriculture, that's a major statement, right? But that needs to be defined into a strategy. And we don't have this culture, in our country of actually coming up with strategies and sticking to them and testing them and adjusting them. But I believe that it's very important that as a country, we just don't make decisions like, okay, now healthcare is booming, so let's go into healthcare. Or now technology is this, or now tourism is done, so let's kill tourism. So, I think we need to go a layer deeper. So if we talk about agriculture, let's go a layer deeper. Where in agriculture? If we talk about tourism, obviously tourism for a long time, we need to reform it. But where exactly? What does it mean? But there are principles. I would say, well, let's focus on the principles of the basic needs of the population and ensuring that connectivity of the population to the world remains in place. So it's a balance, and we need to consciously develop that and think about that. So that's what I would say, as an answer.
Yeah. Very makes sense. I mean, for you, agriculture would be the first sector for Tunisia to focus on. Security also. I would add also healthcare. You also mentioned healthcare, but I feel that healthcare is something that we have like solid background, but I feel that the healthcare system is currently struggling. So I think the government should focus more on this because of its importance given this crisis. So now, in addition to economic sectors, our question for you would be also to what, according to you, would be the major capital project that should be accelerated during this time to be taken to the next level, basically?
Well, there are two types of capital projects that do correlate with economic development. Number one is ports. Number two is power, so transmission lines and power generation. And these are because in any place in the world, if you do not have power, you can't have an economic activity. And if you do not have a port, you can't get whatever you produce out and sell it to a larger market. And that's our challenge in Tunisia. So when I say let's focus on agriculture, the contingent to that is that, okay, we can produce, but then, okay, we need to export. We need to develop a base, basically, for exporting whether what we produce or what we transform. And to do that, we need electricity. So, I mean, and that's kind of like economic studies have shown that. These are the two key capital projects, capital investments in a way that do correlate with those. And the issue with those two is that you can do those if many of them needs to be subsidized in a way. So the government, basically the Tunisian people need to invest in those so that they can actually get international investments into these. So ports could be funded internationally. But I would say that, we need to understand our priorities from a capital investment standpoint, and those two are key for Tunisia's economic development. So.
Okay, thank you for your answer. So my third question regarding Tunisia would be about the role of the diaspora. So what would be the role of the what are the current challenges and successes of the Tunisian diaspora in times of COVID?
So when you say Tunisia diaspora, is that the Tunisians abroad?
Yeah. Tunisian talents abroad.
Well, it's not that I'm a Tunisian abroad, but my belief is that one of our strengths as a country is Tunisians abroad. So it's literally like, it's what makes us, it's an asset. It's an asset. And unfortunately, we've seen over the past few years, there is this thing where, and it happens in a lot of countries, when the situation gets tough, people close a little bit on themselves and they become somehow anti-global. And that translated in Tunisia by a lot of new ideas and so on, just making it like it's a bad thing that you're abroad, or it's a bad thing that you're working internationally, or there is a sense of superiority for people who do not have international experience, which I believe that's just the wrong debate to have. International experience, being able to work with other countries, other people, other cultures is a skill and a competency by itself. And for Tunisia's economic development, we're not living alone in this world, right? We live in an equation of so many others around us. It's geopolitical and economic equation that is global. And so for us to generate wealth for our own people, we need to work with others. So that's the priority. And to work with others, we need the skill and the experience of working with internationals. So who are the people who can do that? People who have that skill and experience, right? So that's the Tunisian diaspora, internationally. And so that's kind of like what I think it's an asset. And I personally believe Tunisia's growth and and prosperity literally cannot happen without Tunisians abroad. That's how I believe the importance of it. So
I totally agree. But out of 100%, how much is this asset utilized according to you?
Can you ask that question in another way, just for me to?
So I mean, do you think that this asset is utilized? Is like effectively utilized?
No, not at all.
Yeah. This is also my. I share with you the same opinion. I think that.
And speaking, we spoke. You work with a great company. You're all about strategy. I'm sure many of you here, you guys are shapers. So the idea of shaping something is this idea of figuring out the strategy and kind of like figuring out where to go and shaping an environment. When it comes to the involvement of Tunisians abroad with Tunisia, it has to be shaped into an environment. It can't be random. It can't be a personal initiative here and there. It has to be a founding principle of the way the country conducts itself in the world. And it's not the case. And so that's why I think the opportunity is wasted and the impact is not big. That's because it's not a shaped framework and an asset. So
I agree. So speaking of shapers and speaking of youth, according to you, what would be the role? So what advice actually would you give the youth watching us today? What skills, according to you, are essential to acquire in these times?
I would say for anybody watching, post-COVID, I think it's this. A lot of people said globalization is dead after COVID. I say it's the other way around, actually. I would say take this opportunity to connect yourself to the world with all the tools and the technology available for you as much as possible. That's, I think, is a key factor for success. It would open your mind. And, I believe that the success of the global, of the global community, the group is the sum. It's bigger than the sum of the success of each one of us. But the prerequisite is that each one of us individually is successful and is making their way and growing, basically. So success is growth, really. There is no such thing as, oh, I'm successful now. No, you know, it's not. No.
It's a journey, yeah.
Keep growing. That's my goal. Keep growing. Keep being connected to the world. Use anything available for you to keep moving. And as long as you do that, for me, that's the priority. That's what's most important, really. So.
Thanks a lot, Olfa. I can go on with so many questions for you, but just for the sake of time, let me open up the floor to our shapers for them to ask their questions directly to you. Thanks a lot. Who wants to go next? I know that Enis, I don't know whether Enis is here. Enis?
Yeah, right here. Yeah.
Hello.
Hey.
Ça va? Okay. So the floor is yours, Enis.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been fascinating. So my question is slightly related to the last topic of discussion. I'm an entrepreneur. I was based abroad. I looked at some of the systemic infrastructure issues, decided there is one that I wanted to tackle, and moved back to create a company here. The thing that I always ask myself, and I try to especially talk to a lot of the diaspora that ask me, how can I sort of contribute back, whether I'm physically in Tunisia or abroad, it doesn't matter as much as trying to get involved in some capacity is. What do you think is the best way to tackle some of the infrastructure core problems that you have? Is it the private sector? Is it the government? For somebody who doesn't know exactly where they fit best, how would you go about sort of that process of getting involved into a specific problem? And do you think that getting involved in government, especially at the transition period that we're in, is the right way to go to actually solve that issue?
Thank you for the question. It's quite a complex question, and I appreciate that a lot because complex questions mean actually complex solutions as well. So there is no such thing as simple solutions. So there are multiple ways to go, and I don't discount any one of them, whether private sector, whether you go through it through the civil society, whether you do it through government. But I would emphasize that doing it through government is key. So I'm just, kind of like trying to answer your question quite, literally about maybe that's what you mean, right? You want to work with the government or get involved through the government channels. I think that's important. And if you have the opportunity to do that, go ahead and do it. But there are many other ways, but that's one of the most critical ways.
Just as a quick follow-up, do you think also that's the quickest way to go? Because we're always talking about how we're trying to solve relatively the urgent problems or trying to put some structure in. Do you think that the impact on both sides can be within the same time frame if done correctly?
So do you have a specific problem in mind, a sector in mind, or generally speaking?
I think I'm trying to generalize it because this is always a topic of discussion from people who want to get involved but don't know how. Yeah. And I think, so I work on mostly everything financial sector related, where you can see that the private sector can make a big push and can find ways to work around the regulations that exist, etc. But I think some other sectors don't have that luxury. But also people tend to just, especially people our age, sort of the younger generation, doesn't really want to get involved in government, don't believe they can crack through the systemic structure or organization of the government. And I think what I'm trying to understand is how can you rationalize somebody who's young and ambitious and has energy that wants to see some sort of concrete result? How can you convince them to get into government at this stage of the transition that we're going through?
Thank you. That's a very powerful question. So so there is this, philosophy, and it's a theory also that's proven that when a system is obsolete and you just try to fix it, and okay, it's like it's leaking everywhere, there is no way fixing it. You should just create a system in parallel and then replace that obsolete system. So a lot of people see, I mean, many organizations and even in the private sector, in many industries around the world, that's how major change happened, right? Disruption, what we call disruption, which is instead of going, let's say, I'll tell you, for example, in my industry, instead of going into one of the large big corporations and then going through the ranks and trying to change from in between, well, you know what? I'm going to do a startup company that's going to disrupt the way the market is being, the operations are being made. And by making that disruption, now I have that new power, which is the new demand, and now I make the rules. That's kind of like how the private sector and how innovation has driven change for humanity and societies. Look at social media, but I can cite so many other sectors where that's how disruption and change happened. It happened outside of the formal institutions, which we call legacy institutions. Now, in the private sector, obviously, politically speaking and ethically speaking, that's possible. When it comes to government, there is this whole idea that government, you can't create a government in parallel to the government. You can't do that. There is a certain legitimacy to the fact that the government as an institution is there to stay for societies. That's how we chose to organize ourselves. So when we talk about change in government, we talk about political change. We don't talk about administrative changes and things like that. That can only happen afterwards. So with a country in transition like Tunisia, if you're talking to a young person and you want to convince them to make a change, my view is that when I look at people like you and how you're so energetic and so eager for change, also capable of making change and capable of enduring the pain of making change, because change is painful, I would say do it through the political side rather than through the pure operational side within the government. I would not encourage any young person right now to join the ranks, to make a career in the government, because the system is going to institutionalize you as a young person. And it's a waste. Literally, you can't fight the system, literally. That's my belief, of course. So I would say, in whatever capacity you work, if you want to make a change in Tunisia, make it political. That's my belief after all the experience I've gone through. Now, speaking of the financial sector specifically, I believe private sectors could be, when they are advanced and they have that flexibility to organize, they could lead to change by the power of influence and lobbying. And I think that could happen through literally organization. So, for example, I called for this in Tunisia. I say, engineers, they need to organize in a way that that is anchored into providing them with the competencies and the framework and the governance, and have a code of ethics that makes them a strong force in presenting what's right for the country and for the industry, instead of going to unions and things like that. Just actually as a core competency, that a common technical background. So if financial sector, yes, the financial sector could have the association for financial analysts, for example. I'm just citing something. I'm not very familiar with the sector, but that association could have 100,000 members, and these members are there, and all you do is you identify some of those gaps that are challenging your sector and your competitiveness comparing to the global sector and what you want to do, and you identify that agenda and lobby for it. And because you're a force, you can lobby for that improvement in your own sector, changing the laws, and so on. So it's really all about organization. And for our country, I believe if we learn more and more the power of organizing, but organizing behind something substantial, instead of some ideas like unions are right now. No, I think if we can rally in some of those substantial groups, I think change could happen. So there are multiple ways to make change happen, but I hope I answered your question, though.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it.
Just to be mindful of the time, we still have 4 or 3 actually minutes before we close. I believe that Wafa has another question and it should be the last one before we close. So Wafa, the floor is yours. Is Wafa hearing us?
Mulka, I think Wafa didn't join us, so I can.
Okay. It's actually we. I saw the W. I thought that it was Wafa. It's actually we. Okay. Does anyone of you have another question for Olfa before we close?
So I can read the Wi-Fi's questions.
Okay.
So she said, how can we achieve green recovery after coronavirus?
Achieve, sorry, what?
Green recovery.
Green recovery?
Yeah.
You mean like environmentally speaking?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Well, I might not be the best person to answer that because, I work in the petrochemical industry and I'm not the most environmentally friendly person. So I would say, when we look at, I would look at this from a social impact standpoint. Global warming has impacted communities tremendously. We look at fires right now in California, the floods that are happening in many parts of the world. Tunisia, actually, I was reading this report about the impact of global warming in some of the areas. Tunisia is one of the most countries that are most impacted by global warming in the Mediterranean Sea. So, and we've seen that with the flooding happening in Nabil, for example, and these areas, people losing their families, their cars, their assets, their homes, cities, impacted by infrastructure and so on. So I would put this in the context of when it comes to the global warming and how it impacts the economies of countries. I believe that's key, and it's really about communities losing their ability to live, create their own economic realities and live in a safe environment, people displaced and so on. So I would say, I don't have the answer to that question, but I would say every country at the highest levels, they need to be mindful of that and listen to the scientists and those impact studies, and have what we call resilience. In construction, some projects that we do are part of those decade-long and 20, 30, 50-year-long strategies for cities around the impact of risks associated with flooding and fires and all of those environmental catastrophes that could happen. And so every country should, at the highest levels, have a strategy for how global warming is impacting communities and what infrastructure is needed, what investment is needed, what urban planning is needed, all of those kind of things. It has to happen from the top down. That's what I could say from a capital project standpoint. Otherwise, I'm not the expert in the area of green, and emissions and all of those things. So.
Thank you. Malka, I think Elias has questions.
Elias has a question?
Yeah.
Okay. Can we still 2-3 minutes more time from you, Olfa? Is it fine?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thanks a lot. Elias.
Hi everyone, this is Elias Hashena speaking. Thank you, Olfa, for sharing your insights. Initially, I had a question about the Tunisian diaspora. You talked about the Tunisian diaspora and how they could contribute to Tunisia right now. I want to ask you how, let's say, why it's not working right now. I saw there is many programs trying to involve more and more diaspora. There is a GIZ, for example, trying to let's say encourage diaspora to open up businesses in Tunisia. But according to you, how could we make the best out of the skills and the willingness of Tunisians living abroad to help fellow Tunisian or just to give back? So this was the first question. And if we still have time, you said earlier that according to you, to make change in Tunisia, this change needs to be political. I want you to develop on that, meaning it's you need advocacy, or it's meaning political change, you need to be part of a political, be a part of the political scene. So those were the two questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your question. On the first question on how to help, I think every Tunisian abroad, in a way, can help in many ways. but everybody chooses. It's a personal decision, right? Everybody chooses the extent by which they help. So, for example, you guys, by just organizing this event, you are helping. I mean, it's impact that what you're doing. I personally, I kind of like I did for over 9 years now what I call Najah workshops. So these are leadership training and educational sessions for youth in either high schools and universities. I've done it for years, and I actually kind of like recently formalized it in a sort of a 501c3. So it's a nonprofit organization. But the idea is that to expand that to as many people as possible, and make it available for free for people, because I can't travel anymore. I can't do it in person. And my, people, the Tunisians that are alumni of this academy, basically, that are doing the very same thing that I used to do. So that's how it grew. They can do it, with the traveling. So now we're kind of like thinking of how to make this of a larger scale. So these are some things. I'm sure many other Tunisians help by either. I mean, I can cite my personal experience. I at some point, I made the business decision of opening a branch of my business in Tunisia, which was a complete failure, and it was not the right business decision, and I admit it because I made the decision from an emotional standpoint, and it was not a justified business decision, so it didn't work well. And I kind of like I blurred the lines there between business and personal. And you mentioned, organizations like GIZ, or these are international, German or foreign organizations trying to improve things in Tunisia. But all of this is great, and I believe the sum of every single thing all of us we do. I mean, a Tunisian abroad can help in a simple way, as when they send money through one of those money transfer organizations to their families in one of the governorates and help, they're helping. I mean, for me, that's the simplest way of helping. But when it comes to actually creating growth, and what I mean by creating growth is literally in the way our GDP grows, using the Tunisians abroad, which are in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, but using at least the educated ones, the experienced ones, the ones that are actively, shaping the global economy, to have their impact on the GDP and our growth. That can't be an initiative from a European country or a foreign country. We need our own leaders to be conscious about it, to be actually lead by conviction. So if you're not convinced that you need Tunisians abroad, doesn't matter what you say. If you create a conference, you gather them, or you say we need Tunisians abroad, it doesn't work. I've been through that for years. I've kind of like provided advice to the highest levels of government, studies, resources. I mean, and I do it just willingly, but the truth is, when you're talking to somebody that's not convinced, it's like you look like you're selling yourself to that person. I'm like, I don't need any. I'm doing this for my country. I mean, I can't change the fact that I'm Tunisian. Come on. I mean, I'm Tunisian. So me being involved in Tunisia is as natural as breathing, literally. So why do you question? Why do I want to be involved in Tunisia? So this takes me to your second question. When I look at you guys and I look at, all the Tunisians abroad, and especially those that made the choice of going back and starting companies there or getting involved there and so on, I would say, yes, get involved into the politics. What I mean in the politics is get involved into bringing in a different narrative, a different idea. I guess I have to tell you this. When I became more visible, which I decided to just go outside and speak about my experience and how the brain drain in Tunisia is serious, about the fact that when you interact with the institutions, there is a cultural issue with the leadership. A lot of people, support that, but I felt like it's like I'm alone speaking about that, So what we need is really a different narrative. and to present a different narrative about why Tunisians abroad are important. But it's not only that, why connecting with the world is important, why international experience is important, why do we, why a CEO of a public company or a minister or a leader of a department or a leader of a political party, they need to be connected to the world. They need to know how to speak English. They need to understand how to work abroad. They need to understand the concepts of how the global economy works. That's not a luxury. You need that. And so, I get passionate about the subject, but my view when I say political is that I encourage you all, wherever you are, if you're involved in a party or not, if you're involved in an association, if you have a platform where you can convey that message, just do it unapologetically, because we need that. Otherwise, Tunisia, we're a small population, so we can't compete in terms of numbers. We can't lower our hourly rates and make our labor cheap to compete with China or to compete with Algeria, as a matter of fact, or with Egypt with 100 million people. We can't compete with those economies. So the only way for us to compete is to use our minds, to use our assets, is to connect with the world and to create some of those deals with the world around us. And the Tunisians who have experience abroad, that's what I mean. Tunisians who have had international experience, whether you're in Tunisia or outside, I believe they're key. So my advice, I don't know your backgrounds, you guys, but wherever you are, get involved, go for it, don't shy away. That's it. That's my final message. So
thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Super powerful message, Olfa, about the new narrative and also the new leadership that needs to be put in place for the country to move on in the right direction. So thank you so much for your time. We really, really appreciated this talk. Super insightful. We've learned a lot from you, and we got the chance to meet you. Hopefully, we'll get the chance to physically meet you soon.
Yes.
Let's stay in touch. Thanks a lot, and best of luck for everything you're carrying right now. Thanks a lot, and have a good assumed day now.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's early morning here. Yeah. So thank you.
I wish you luck early and being with us. We really appreciate it.
I wish you all good luck, and please do not hesitate to reach out if you need anything. I mean, I don't know what I could help with, but please just continue being yourselves and, doing great work. So
we'll definitely be in touch. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.